Hello, everybody. You're going to hear my intro again in just a moment, but I just wanted to put a quick preamble on this video because this hobby cheating is really long, and this turned into a more complex sort of project than I thought it was going to be when I initially started recording it, but I still wanted to put it out there and make it available. Just a warning, like, what I'm going to go through here for making these ice weapons is fairly long and complex. You don't have to do it all, but hopefully it inspires you or interests you, or you want to try something different because of it. So, just a warning that this is much longer than normal, but I really like the effects, and I hope you do too. What we're going to walk through is making the weapons on the bull, on the Doombull, that you just saw at the beginning of this video, and let's get right to it. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Hobby Cheating. So today, you'll notice we're back in the airbrush booth, and we're here because we're going to do something unusual, which is we're going to make some weapons look like ice. So that is our goal today. We're going to make some ice weapons. So I'm going to use a lot of different techniques for this. Like, we're going to probably do both some airbrush, we're going to do some glaze here and there maybe. We're going to kind of wander through some techniques. So our goal here is to make these two giant axes. This is my Doombull. You can't see him right now, but trust me, he's under there. Let me get you up to what I've done so far. So I had painted him already, and he's done. So obviously I needed to cover him all up. So when you tear a rubber glove because you rip a finger off or something, I keep them around and I use them as my wrappy wraps. And you see I've just wrapped it all around him. Did a little tape here to hold it in place, and he's rubber banded at the bottom. That way when we overspray, we don't want to get paint all over our paint job that we spend a lot of time on. So with these big axes, what I've done here is I primed the axe in white, so it's ready to go. And then I laid down just a quick hit of matte varnish just to really seal that primer in there, because in this case I'm going to also be using a little liquid mask, and so that's what's right here. On this one I am using a little liquid mask because I didn't want to get the ice color that I'm going to shoot through first here, since I'm doing the double blade, because we were going to do 2 rows of ice transition on this like double bladed axe. On this one, since it's a little more straightforward, we're going to just do it from the center out. So the colors we're going to use for this are threefold. We're going to use a dark purple, namely the Game Air Hexed Lichen, but you can use any very dark, completely whiteless purple. You don't want any white in there, so let's get that up there. There you go, very dark. We're going to use our electric blue, Game Air Electric Blue, but again, you can see there what that looks like, very light colored blue. And then finally, of course, we're going to use some white. And this is just the old favorite Game Air Dead White. And so those are the 3 colors we're going to use to try to make some ice here today. Okay, so let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take it, and we want to make the heart of the ice the darkest color, because a lot of the challenge of what we're going to do here with these ice weapons is we need to create the illusion of depth, right? Ice is somewhat transparent, and so as a result of that, we need to create that illusion of layer, right? And so to do that, the airbrush is going to be our best friend in this case. And so we're going to start by shooting a little of our Hexed Lichen here, our dark purple, at what will be the core of our ice. So the nearest the haft here, and then on this one it will be toward the edge of the blade, and then again toward the heart of the axe. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and get the paint ready here in the standard way. So I've got my airbrush. I've got my airbrush good to go here. I'm going to put just a couple drops of thinner in there first, because we always start with that. And I'm going to work in fairly thin colors here and at a fairly low pressure, because I want a lot of control while I'm doing this. So I only put 2 little drops of purple in there. You can see, not much at all. Turn on our compressor. As usual, we're just going to block the tip and kind of mix that up. You can see it's just mixing in there. Not much, just very lightly. Okay. Then I'm actually just going to drop I want this to be really thin. So I'm going to put a little more thinner in there. Really kind of thin out that purple. And just make sure it's all nice and mixed. Okay. As usual, we will then test over here on our sheet of paper. Make sure we're getting a nice even flow. Looks like we are there. As Pearl Jam would say, we've got a nice even flow. And so I'm actually going to, I put some liquid mask there on the edge to block it, but I'm even going to use my thumb a little just to make sure that I'm really being accurate with it. And we're going to start on the thumb as usual. There we go. Nice good flow. And then we're going to go. Now, it's okay if we overspray a little. Like you can see, I got a little down there. That's all right. That's not the end of the world. We're trying to do very exact work here, and we're going to clean this up with a brush, obviously. We want the heart of that to be fairly dark. So you can see that's what I'm aiming at there, right? Where it's real dark up against that. And then we'll do the same thing up here on the inside of this piece. We'll go real dark in here because we can afford a little overspray onto the skull. And that is the dead center of the axe. And then finally, we're going to flip this bad boy over so I can more easily access this. Just kind of block it up with my thumb, get some good flow, and then we're just going to trace right up that line. Nice and slow, nice and even. There we go. Let that dry for a moment. And then we're just going to hit it a little more right in the center to really darken it up. Okay. So now that's what we've got. You can see we've got these rows of dark purple. So let's repeat it on the other side quickly here. Again, we're just using our thumb to help direct so we don't get too much overspray. Like I said, we're going to clean it all up later, so it's not the end of the world. We get a little bit, we just don't want a lot. And that is a lot. That's okay. Doesn't always have to be perfect. And this is the first color. And so we've got a little more room to screw up here on the first color. There we go. Nice. Much smoother. Much smoother. Okay. And so now we've got our purple on that side. We've got both sides of that axe done. Now we'll do the easier axe, which is this one, and the bigger axe. And so here, we're just going to shoot right at the heart of it. I'm going to actually spread this out quite wide. That way the transition with the darker purple is very clear. Because remember, we're going to be putting a lot of colors over this. So it's okay if we go a little overboard. Alright, same thing then on the other side. Alright, now, we don't want to forget on this one the top of the axe there, right? It's kind of hidden there, but we want to make sure we also get in there and hit that and the bottom. Don't want those to stay white. The heart of this thing should be that color all the way around. Same thing with the other axe, although it's actually got, the other axe will have some gold in there when I do the middle, when I do eventually carve out that skull. But we're going to hit it just a little in there, just to make sure. And same thing here on the top. And there we go. Okay, we can see where we got those two little lines there. Alright, so that's our purple done. There we go. We get rid of the rest of our purple. Just get that out of there. Again, we're not blowing it out at full speed. We're just kind of, you know, emptying out whatever's left in the clip. And then we wash it out standard fashion. We're going to do 2 quick rounds of cleaner to blow that out into our cleaning station, which is cleverly off camera. And so you can see now, we're going to, and while we're doing this, of course, I'm also giving this just a minute to make sure it's completely dry. You know, we always want to make sure that we We don't rush it with the paints. Airbrush paint will generally, especially when it's thin like this, will generally dry pretty fast, so it's not too much of a worry. But that being said, it's still better to give yourself just an extra minute or so to let things set. And, I mean, if you're quick in between paint changes, a paint change takes me less than 1 minute. I've been doing it while we're sitting here talking. A minute has not yet gone by, right? And there you go. And airbrush, nice and clean, ready for the next color. So the next color is going to be our electric blue, okay? But for this one, we're going to need to be a little sneakier, okay? And so what we're going to do here is we're going to have to actually do this in stages. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some electric blue in there, some thin electric blue. There we go. Down into my airbrush, get it loaded up. Like I said, we want this to be very thin, as with always, because we want to have a lot of control over the paint. We don't want it to get so thin that it just becomes water, but we want it nice and thin. Okay. There we go. We test that. That's great. That's going to be perfect. Okay, so let's start on the big axe this time. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to cover most of the rest of the axe with this. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is just kind of shoot this nice and carefully over the rest of the axe. And I'm going to go over the purple. Okay. And you can see how I'm doing it is I'm trying to make the blue get darker as I go in. And that's one of the reasons we want it so thin. Because we want to start with a nice light blue color, right? Just get a good even coverage on there. We're going to leave the very edge. And then as we rock toward the inside, we just kind of do a couple more coats to deepen up that blue. So what we get is a nice fade. Just like that. Okay? Alright, let's do that to the other side. Same thing. So we start, we go nice and thin. Alright, we're just rocking that trigger back nice and slow. And then we're going to go ahead and go a little thicker as we cover over the purple. Same thing here. Nice and thin. We're leaving the edge white, and then we're focusing a little more on the purple part to tint that. So now what we've done is we've tinted out that purple, right? And already I think we've got a pretty nice look there going on. Now obviously we're a long way from done, but that's a pretty good start. Okay. So now I'm going to do that to the other side as well, but you'll notice I've got the liquid mask on there. So for what we're going to do for this side, okay, is I'm going to give it a shot of blue. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this off camera because you already saw how I did this. And this one's going to require a lot of changes, and we'll come back when I've got it all done. Well, I'll describe what I'm going to do. We're going to shoot some blue over this with the liquid mask on. Basically, we're going to kind of cover the whole thing. Okay? Then I'm going to peel off the liquid mask, and I'm going to do some tape to more effectively control how I want to make it darker and lighter and things like that. Okay? So, we'll leave it right there. As I do the other axe blade, I'll finish out the tops, make sure that gets done because we don't want to leave that in pure white. And we'll be back in a moment and see where we're at. Alright, welcome back. So as you can see, I removed all the liquid mask, and that left these edges here in white. Okay, so you can see I still haven't done anything with the other side. So that's very stark, and that's okay. That's exactly what we want. Because now what I've done here is we've done our standard sort of non-metallic metal highlighting on this because we still want to let light play in the appropriate way. So I'm going to do that again for you here on camera. Okay, so let's turn the compressor on. Let's test our paint, get some flow going here. There we go. Again, we're working on a low pressure. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to start with the middle, and I'm just going to kind of soften that line. Because with the middle, I just wanted it to be, we're going to have to, it's so small, that's going to be mainly brush work to clean that up. And that's okay. So what we want to do here is just use the airbrush to very carefully soften that line up, right? We leave the white just kind of on the edge there. Now here, on this outer edge, what we're going to do is we're going to, so non-metallic metal, we think about the highlight point is always the lower point where the light would hit. So, we're going to take our blue, again, let's get some flow going here. There we go. Okay, we're going to take our blue, we're going to drag it up, and we're going to really focus it right at the top, right at that top corner point. Same thing again here. We're going to keep it kind of light, and then right up at the top, we're going to really focus it up. And then again, really focus it very much under there. And then we just do a touch up top there. Okay, so what we get is these little subtle transitions, right? Where we have the very, you probably can't see it too well in the camera. It looks like it's kind of knocking it out. But it's very dark up here, going lighter here. Let's see if I can be a little more extreme with it, so that way you can really see what's going on. All right, and so then that creates a really nice sort of effect of the light transition, right? And the same thing we're going to do over here. So again, we want our light spot down here on the edge of the blade and our dark up top. So we're going to go back in, and what we're going to do here is, so our light and our dark. So we're going to take this, and we're going to retouch that right up top there. We're going to try our best to trace the line. And then down at the bottom, we're going to extend it in the same way. So we're creating our points of light. Same thing up here on this side. We're going to do our light on the inner blade down to the bottom. Or sorry, our dark on the inner blade down to the bottom. Our dark on that blade up top. Let's flip it around and repeat. So on the outer blade, we want the light at the bottom on axes, generally assuming they're kind of straight up in the air, which this one is. So we're going to go right like that. And then on this, we're going to darken at the opposite side down here. Same thing there. And same thing there. Now, what we're doing here is really more marking it off. Okay? We're trying to make our lives easier. That blue is really shifting around there. We're trying to make our lives easier because now our next steps are going to be to head back over to the regular paint table, and we're going to see if we can't get some more variation in here. I'm just going to kind of clean up this edge, which is still a little harsh. That's okay. We don't mind this harsh edge too much because that's going to be a guide for us later. Once we get into our manual brushwork in a second, you're going to see how we're going to take this up to the next level. Now, we've gone about as far as we can with the airbrush at this stage, but don't worry, we'll be back. We're not leaving you yet, Mr. Airbrush. We'll be back. All right, so we'll call it there, and we'll pick back up over at the normal painting table. Okay, so we're back at the painting desk, and I just want to point something out here. I did end up doing a little bit more with the airbrush off camera. I ended up taking some additional white and just shooting it down at an angle right here to catch the edges of these, just to make my life easier, because I was going to do this with brush, and then I thought, why not make my life easier? So you can see where I just caught the edges of this to push the transitions. Now, I couldn't do it on the inside because I need that dark edge to stay present, so that's going to have to be brushwork right there. I did the same thing over on this side to push our extremes. Now, with this kind of an axe, on this side, we're going to need to make sure we have some lines there on the edge of the blade, and we don't have enough transition. So we're going to be darkening here as well as lightening. Lightening. Using lightning. Yeah. Okay. So how are we going to do that? All right. So we've got our three colors, right? We're still just sticking with the three colors. The white, the electric blue, the purple. We've got our palette over here. We're going to get some on there. Okay. So let's do that. I'm just going to kind of get all three of my colors onto my palette. A little bit of white. A little bit of blue. and a little bit of purple, and we're going to put that kind of to the side over a little farther away because we don't really want that getting mixed in. Now, even though we're on a wet palette here, we're going to use a little thinner, and we're going to thin this down a little thinner, a little glaze, because the reality is that we want all these colors to be very thin. We are going to be working in glazing here, folks, to take this up, okay? So, we want these very thin, especially in the case of the purple, where it's such a dark, strong color. That hex lichen is just ridiculous how potent it is. And if it touches something like this, where it's very light colored, it's going to instantly stain it unless we have it very nicely thinned down. So, we even added a little extra drops of water just to get it mixed in there. Alright, so paint on our palette. We're going to go ahead and mix that in. We're just going to mix, in this case I am using my brush, and that's fine. There we go. Get our paint nice and ready. We're just using the brush in the idea of being a little quicker. Plus I don't want to tear my little paper towel. Alright, so as usual, so we're going to start with the darkening actually, instead of the lightening. And lightening. Instead of making things, instead of the highlighting. Hey, there you go. That's the right word. So as usual, we're going to do our back of the thumb test for our purple. And you can see that is very, very light. And that's what we want, right? We want that to be just the slightest tint. You can see how much skin is still showing through there, right? And that's what we want. Because we're just looking to create a little bit of color transition. So we're going to do the dark first. So what we're going to do here is up toward the edge of this, we're going to just draw that up. Right? We want to kind of draw it up along the blade line. And directionality of the brush is very important here, because your paint is going to gather at the end of your stroke. So you want to make sure that the end of your stroke is where you want the most paint. So there you can see where we've done a couple darker marks of that purple. And you can see it's not really turning it very purple. It's just kind of tinting it down. And that's what we want. Because in this case, we're using the purple to create this tint more than we're using it to actually make it purple. Okay, so now we've got those. You can see where we've made that darker. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So we're just going to get in there. We're not like, there's going to be a hard line at this point, and that's alright. We know that's going to happen. In the same way that when we shot the airbrush with this purple, we had very hard lines. We're going to have it here as well. And so we're just making our little purple shadows, purple shadows, always moving the brush in the direction we want it to go, trying to use the side of the brush rather than the tip. And we're going to come back in and we're going to do it one more time just up at the very edge. Right, so I'm coming back in, that other side is dry now because it's a glaze and it dries very quickly. And I'm getting in there and just doing the lightest, smallest touch up right into the corner. Okay? Because we really want to push the contrast on this. That's going to help us here in a little while. So again, just making the edges of this nice and dark. We want very sharp little edges. That's why I'm using a side of my brush. So I've got the control that I want. Okay, so there we go. Now we can see we've created some very dark shadows, right, here on the edge of the blade. So now we're going to do the same thing again, but we're going to do it on the inside of in here, right, because we want to recreate some of this in here, all right. And so we're going to just kind of push it in and make sure we really darken the middle. This one's a little easier because we've still got a lot of the purple from our airbrush in here. So we don't need to be quite as careful. We're just kind of making sure that we're really darkening the deep recesses. There's going to be some gold over this. This little skull and piece are going to turn gold at the end. So I'm not doing much here. This is just some slight color transition, just to make sure it's nice and dark. Basically, we're just cleaning up where the blue might have gotten a little too deep and might have washed out a little too much of our purple. We're just reclaiming a little of that shadow. So that's a quick step. There you go. That's done. All right, now we're going to go over to the other axe here. Now, we need to do the same thing here we did on the other side, because we need to take that darker color and bring it out into our shadows. So what are we going to do? We're going to go up here in the sideways stroke right along the edge of the blade, and we're going to try to stop right up top there, because that's where we want the dark part of this at. Okay? Just nice, smooth, angular stroke right up to the edge. And then down here, same thing. We're going to flip him around so that the tip of the brush is always hitting where I want it to be hitting, right? And what we're going to do there is just nice, smooth, angular stroke. Okay? There we go. So then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Same premise here where we darkened it before, right? Down here at this. Sorry, I'm trying to keep it on camera, but it's a very unusual angle because this guy's axes are huge. So we're just going to drag that down. We want that to start thin and then go wide. And same thing up top here. And we've got this other little piece here, which we're going to get to those later. Okay, so now we've gotten our darker parts there. Flip this over. We're going to just repeat the same process again very quickly and easily. Need to get a little more paint on there. You notice I'm working with very little paint on the brush because this is extremely watered down, and so I need it to be just as close to no paint on the brush as I can get because I need a very good amount of control. Okay. So then we're going to go ahead and get this side. And then we're going to get our final highlight here up top. It's a little trickier because of those things, but we can't always move exactly in the direction we want. Can't get our nice, completely smooth stroke, but that's okay. All right, so now we can see where we've created our deeper shadows. And just as before, we're going to kind of run over it again. Once it's dry, we're just going to make sure we've got a nice, deep, dark edge line. I'm going to do that very quickly here. We really want to push that edge line. We want just some very extreme contrast on this for the moment, because all of this is going to soften up later. So for the moment, you really want to push that contrast. Okay. All right, and there we go. So now we can see how that one looks. Looks pretty good. Looks like we need to darken that up just a little bit there. Okay. So now we've taken our ice axes. We've created our low light. Our next step is going to be to create our extreme highlights. Okay, so we're going to rinse off the brush, and for all our extreme highlights, we're going to be using white. Just straight white. This is ice. It's okay in this case to be using, straight white. And this, again, so we're going to start with our thumb test, as always. Now, you can see how that looks. It's not very thick. And we're going to go to the opposite side, and we're going to do the same thing. Now I already had pre-made my life a little easier here with the airbrush, so this should actually be pretty quick, but it's the same thing just in reverse, right? I'm just pushing up and out, pushing up and out, really making sure that the tip of this goes completely white. Just like where the edge line is, where I want to show the light being completely caught and reflected, turns completely white. Now, as with anything with white, if you may have to do this a couple coats just to make sure you get a clean one. Again, that's why I started with the airbrush, just to make my life a little easier when we got to this stage, because I knew it was coming. Apologize for not putting that on camera. I kind of realized it after I had shut down and moved the camera back and everything and said, well, I can just tell you, you all seem like smart people. You can probably use your imagination. Alright, so we're just continuing to hit all the low lights. It's basically the reverse of what we just did with the purple, right? We want to make sure we're moving our brush at the correct angle. We're trying to create sharp little lines of this white, but through the use of a smooth glaze. Okay? We want extremely thin paint here. Okay? So, now we've pushed our highlights up, right? And so there we go. Now we're getting into some good, solid extremes on the edge of that axe. That's what we like. We'll smooth that out later. Then we're going to go do the same thing over here on the other side. Okay? So on the other axe, same story. Second verse, same as the first. I apologize if not every one of these strokes is ending up on camera. I'm trying my best here, but this guy is quite big and annoying. On an axe like this down here, it's especially important to have a nice hard line delineation between your dark and your light, as that really is what's going to push that illusion home, right? And if you say to yourself, Vince, it looks like you're doing almost like a non-metallic metal, you are correct. This is the same techniques are used for that. And we want to create that illusion, because what non-metallic metal does is really work with light very well. And it creates a big illusion of depth. And we're using that technique here. We're basically cheating and stealing that technique to create the illusion of depth in our ice, right? As I mentioned at the top, the challenge we're going to face with doing ice weapons, as opposed to like a fiery weapon or something, is that ice is naturally translucent. Okay? Like, obviously you can see through ice. I don't think I'm shocking anybody here with these revelations. And so as a result of that, we need to push up some of this contrast to really inspire the feeling of depth in the eye of the viewer. Okay? Because it's hard plastic. I can't actually make it see-through. That's not a thing. So if I can't do that, then I have to do my best to fake it, which is really what miniature painting is all about. The entire thing is about faking it. That's all it is. That's all it all is. So keep going here. You notice I'm back on the other side because that was dry. This is a white, so it takes lots of thin glazes to get my color pushed up, even with the airbrush. So there we go. Got that kind of pushed out. And we're going to go back to the big axe. We're going to do it again. You see how this goes. This is going to be a long one, because I am committed to doing as much of this on camera for you as possible. Feel free to fast forward if you don't like to watch me do each of these steps. Alright. But for those who do want to see it, I want to make sure you see everything I do. Okay. So, there's that axe. There's that axe. Now, the next thing we need to do is, you remember that inside, right? These inner areas. Okay? So, we're going to need to, for this, what we're going to do is we're going to start up top with just a little edge highlight, because we just want to pick out the edge of this, show where it's catching the light. So we're going to use the side of our brush, and just very gently, you can see I'm just doing a lot of little strokes to just build that up. And then down here, same thing again. And then as I come down, in the same way, I'm going to build that white, and then actually let it go over the whole blade and away from the edge. So up top here, it's just kind of on the edge. Same thing on the other side. And because of the way we shot this with the liquid green stuff, or sorry, not liquid green stuff, I apologize, with the liquid latex, we have this area is naturally thinner because it didn't take that first solid coat I did, which is why we did that in the first place. So you can see just like that, all of a sudden we've got a bigger transition there, right? So we're going to let that dry. We're going to let that glaze dry. We're going to flip it around to the other side. We're going to repeat the same thing again. Just lots of tiny, very, very light strokes, right? Because all I want to do is just catch that edge and have a nice, smooth little slight transition. Light touch is the name of the game, okay? You're not in a fight with a miniature. You don't need to, you're not trying to win with pressure. It's okay. But again, we're moving in the direction we want the paint to gather. So we're always pulling down here at the bottom. Now when we're edge highlighting, our direction matters a little less. I'm just really going back and forth quickly to catch it. Okay, so there's that side. Back over. Another coat. Now my edge is pretty solid, so I'm going to leave that. And then what I really want to do is just really sharpen up that bottom white. Because we want it to look faded, and that's the advantage of us using our glazes. Is that it creates very, very soft, subtle transitions we can build up. Right? So now we've got it like that. Okay? And then same thing again over here on this side. Some quick white edging just to make sure that's there, and then we're going to draw that paint down to the bottom. Just draw it right down. And on this side. Very, very, very light touch. Okay. Feels pretty good. So now you can see that's what we look like on the double blade. It's coming together. Okay? All right. But our contrasts are really sudden here, especially like on this one, right? So we need to smooth that out a little. And how we're going to do that is we're going to go to some mixed glazes of our midtone. So I put the blue on there, right? And I'm going to take my blue out of my palette. I'm going to remix it up just a little bit, make sure nothing's separated without a mediums or whatever. We're going to draw another pool of that right here. Then I'm going to take just a touch of the purple. We're going to get that right there. Okay? Wipe that, get the excess off my brush. Touch it to my paper towel. We're going to do a back of the thumb test as to how that tinted the white. That's why we keep that white there, because now I can see how that's going to look. Looks pretty good. Right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace over in the same way. I want this to come up. So up here, up top, I'm just going to really go over the edge line where my purple was. And I'm going to make the same shape this up toward the edge. These little metal rivets make this tough, but that's okay. Right up there. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here on the lower part. Right? I'm just going to go ahead and kind of cover most of the purple except for the very edge because I'm only tinting it slightly. And then on the other side. And so all we're doing is just adding a second low tone. We're not covering all of the purple up. And even if we couldn't anyways, because this is such a thin glaze. That's what we want. And then on here. But you can see I'm going a little down. I'm going down a little farther than I did with the purple. Because I want to really mix that tone. Okay. Alright, over here. I really went crazy with the purple on that one. That's alright. And on this side, So again, all I'm doing here is basically covering my purple and then focusing especially on the edge line where the purple had met the electric blue. Just trying to smooth that edge out, right? That's really my goal here. We're trying, even though we're working in glaze, we still have a really hard transition between that. So now what we have is something that looks like that. You can see the edge line of that purple is very much softened, right? And if you feel like you're not dark enough, like if I feel like the top of that axe on this right up here isn't dark enough, I can take it a little darker, right? We can just do it again real quick. We'll let that dry. Maybe there. You know, I'm just kind of touching up. I can recover it. That's the advantage of having it on the palette. I can always go back in and just retouch that up. There's nothing wrong with that. I still have my mid-tone that I mixed between the blue and the purple over there on the palette. Keeping my brush nice and wet, nice and clean, right? Making sure we're staying in our nice thin glaze, and then I can go and just take that down again. Take that edge right down. What I'm doing now is just going over all of my edge lines with a second quick glaze because we want to really make sure that those transitions are soft. Ice does not have those hard lines in it with the shadows because that's what we're making here. We're making shadows, right, in the ice. That's not going to be a hard line. We're going to get to some hard lines a little later, so you'll see what that looks like. Now we're going to go to the other axe. We're going to repeat the same process. We're going to smooth out those mid-tones on the blades here. Same brush angle if we can manage it. And we're just quickly, this, you know, each little stroke doesn't take very long. Just a couple quick brush strokes, right? We're just quickly glazing right over that dark purple, bringing it back in line, smoothing out the edge, and creating some more tonal variation in our axe here. Okay. Okay. Flip it over, just repeat again. In general, when you're working in thin glazes like this, you want to do a couple, right? Maybe not all that you can do. You stop when you're comfortable. That's what it boils down to. If you feel like you need 3 or 4 or 5, that's fine. I mean, it's a few seconds a piece, and when your paint is really thin and glazed like this, it's going to dry super fast. So, like, it's not like you're sitting there waiting on that. We're going to soften my line up here with my purple. This one's just fairly simple. I'm just actually just tracing it right down the original line I had, right? And there we go. So that's what our axes look like now. Now, we need to soften the highlight. So we're going to do the same thing again, but in the opposite direction, right? So we're going to take a little bit of our blue, put it up here. We're going to grab a little bit of our white. We're going to mix that in. And if you feel like your paint's drying out a little, that's okay. I am going to take that and I'm going to thin it just a tad because I feel like it's, even though it's in the wet palette, sometimes when we make a second color like that, it doesn't always stay as wet as I want. And you'll get the sense of where you want to be. You can always mix a little more paint in if you need it. Not a big deal. Okay. So now we test again, see how light we are. Very light. Good, that's what we want. Because now we're going to take this, right, and we're going to kind of just clean up our highlights here where those are hitting. This is a very small change, but where we ran over it with the white, we're just kind of creating a softer transition here and there with the blue, right? So this one's really quick because we're just trying to soften this white out just a bit. Because our white was so thin and was a glaze, there's not much we need to do here. It was already a fairly soft transition. But it's still good to have to go over there to make sure you've just got all your transitions nice and smooth. Because we don't want those hard lines. Not on this. We want a bunch of nice, smooth transitions. So we're just going to do a bunch of very simple glazes. There's nothing crazy I'm doing here. There's no real tricky technique other than just the brush control to be very gentle. That's it. That's all there is to that step, right? Now, if you're still not happy, you could always take your midtone and you could redo, you know, fix where you see it needs fixed. If you feel like you're missing some midtone, add some more midtone, right? If you feel like you're missing, like wherever you're not comfortable with the color, like I look at that and I'm like, that blue-purple mix is still kind of not as smooth as I'd want it to be. Okay, that's fine. If that's what you think, you've still got your color over there on your palette, so you just go in there, you kind of smooth that out a little again. No big deal. Same thing here. And so on and so forth, right? The point is, you stop when you're comfortable. I'm not going to tell you when to stop, how many times to glaze, or anything like that. The answer is as many as you feel are necessary to have nice, smooth color transitions all the way around. And once you feel like that's what you've achieved, once you feel like, yes, I'm in a good place, I've got all my lines are nice and smooth, I like where they're at, then we're ready to move on to the next step. Okay, so I'm just cleaning up a few of mine with the actual midtone, going back with the original blue here, just here and there. Alright, so there we go. Now, we're in a pretty good place, but what we're missing here is we need our actual lines. Okay? And by that I mean we need to edge the actual transitions in the blade. Now this is a tricky step because it's easy to have this one go wrong on you. Okay? To have the edge line that we're going to create here between these two look false or hollow or too thick. So I am going to get out a much finer point brush. I'm normally painting with like a size 1 or 2. This is a size 1 in the miniature line, which is much, much tighter and comes to a really hyper-fine point. Now, I didn't go to a thick paint. I stayed with my thin glaze. And I did that because I want this line to be kind of soft at first. And I'm just going to apologize that I'm not talking during that because it's so fine work that if I talk I might breathe and screw it up. So I'm just literally tracing the edge of the blade very lightly. And I'm just using a couple strokes very quickly to create a very soft transition line. Okay? So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And this axe is a little tricky because of this big symbol. That's okay, we're going to use that symbol to our advantage. Because that's going to be, eventually when that becomes an actual metallic color, it's going to actually create our edge line for us right there. So you can see I'm just repeatedly tracing and just making sure that's nice and smooth. Okay? Same thing to the other side. A lot of this, I'm glad I decided to do this with two big giant axes for you for an example piece, because then you get to watch me do everything 4 times. That's got to be super exciting for everybody. Very light strokes. Just focus on your control. Right? And then same thing over here. Last one. At least for this side. Okay. So there we go. Now we have our nice lines here, right? Okay. Okay. And if you see, if this one, like I look at this one and I'm like, I kind of did that one a little too big. I don't know if you can see it, but I can see it. And if that's the case, you can always just go back, grab one of your tones that's near where that is, and you just kind of glaze over the edge of it just a little to really smooth that out. And then you can kind of retrace it, right? That's why we're keeping all of this on our palette, so that if we feel like we didn't quite nail it, we can just go back and fix it, right? Easy peasy. All right. Sorry, I'm really trying not to be a perfectionist on this, but little things bother me. Okay, so there we go. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same over here off camera on this one, kind of trace my lines. And then when we come back, we're going to do the next step. All right, I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so we've got our axes all done here as far as the white goes. Let me talk about what I did. So you can see I edged the blade. We also did some edge highlighting along the edge. Traced all these edges out. Smoothed out the tops, made sure they're good to go. And then the other thing we did is these blades come with a lot of notches, and you can see we took our recess color, that dark purple, dropped that down in the recess, and then took our highlight color of the white and just ran one thin line across that. Okay? So all our notches are now carved out so we can see, so they stand out nice and strong. Okay? So now let me just say this. We could stop right here, all right? And this would be fine. I think these look pretty good. They're not really ice yet, but if you just wanted like frosty or super cold, weapons, I think this would be perfectly acceptable. I think they got a good look. So you could stop here. But I'm not going to do that. We're going to press on. We're going to make bad decisions, okay? So how are we going to do that? Well, we still don't, we've pushed our contrast, but we still don't really have depth. And we still don't really look like ice. We look like kind of cold, frosty power weapons or something in a really strange, like ice, frost, non-metallic metal. So we need to create some depth, okay? And to do that, we're going to turn to our friend Gloss Varnish. But we're going to use it in a slightly unorthodox manner, okay? So let's put that to the side. We're going to get a little plastic cup here. Okay. Make sure I don't have anything in it from the last time I used this. Okay, we're good. All right, so I'm going to take some of my gloss varnish. Now, with gloss varnish, you always want to make sure it's really shaken up. You want that to be like, you don't want this to be sticky or gummy or separated, because there's medium in here too and all sorts of things. And so we're going to take that, and we're going to put some down in the bottom of our cup here. We're going to get a fair amount. More than I need, probably. That's fine. That'll do it. Okay. And then we're going to take our little friend, Guilman Blue. I don't even know. It's a glazed color from Citadel. Should still be available, I believe. And this is such a useful thing for doing ice, because what we need to do here to create depth is we need to get a layer over this so that this is below something, okay? Because we got to layer our way up, but not in the normal sense of like layering paint. We need multiple translucent layers to affect ice. So to do that, we're going to take our Guilman Blue, and we need a slightly off-color blue from anything else we did. And if you look at that, you see how that's almost, it's a kind of an interesting difference between those two, right? And that's why we're going to use it. So I'm going to grab my little medicine dropper. If you remember way back in Hobby Cheating 1, when we talked about our tools, talked about medicine droppers. I'm going to get a little bit up in there. Now, I don't need a lot. This stuff's powerful, and I want it to be translucent. So we're just going to go 1, 2. You can always add more. It's hard to take away. Okay, we're just going to do 2 little drops of that stuff down in there. Okay, clean out our dropper. Don't want to leave any kind of paint inside your medicine dropper. Otherwise, you get nastiness like that, which is what, from me leaving it in there one time previously and forgetting. Okay, now we're going to go to our stick. We're going to get that down in there, and we're going to just mix that up just like crazy. We're going to mix, 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 mix. All I'm doing is just rubbing it, just running it around, making sure that that's nice and spread out all evenly, like that blue, because it's actually rather thick when you put it in a varnish or something. Okay? And we're just shaking it. We're like I said, it might seem like I'm being a bit extreme here, but I really want this to be mixed. Okay, so now what I've got is something like that. You can see that's just a little bit of thick blue, slightly blue tinted gloss varnish. Now we're not just going to put this directly on. I need to make sure I put in the right amount of blue. So what we're going to do is just take a little bit out, and I'm going to run it over my finger here. And you can see that is just barely visible. Right? You see how much blue that is? That's what we want. Okay? We're just trying to get a slightly translucent layer. So, I'm going to get some of that on my brush. Not too much. We don't want to flood it or anything. And what we're going to do is we're just going to run a thin layer of this over everything. This is going to have a couple effects. One, it's going to turn our ice glossy, quite obviously. 2, you're going to notice it kind of tints out the white just slightly. But what we're trying to create is just a little bit of depth. Okay? So I'm just going to coat all of this. We don't want to go too hog wild. We don't want to get crazy with it. Okay? We just want to have a nice, even coat. If it collects in any recesses and those little cracks, just pull it out of there, and we keep going. Yeah, let's get the other side. All right, and what we're doing here is basically we're adding an almost completely transparent layer, but it's going to have the effect of having just a slight other color in here to add some more depth to it. And that's the goal. That's what we need. We need to create that depth. Now, we might need to do a couple layers of this gloss varnish just to make sure we really nail it, and that's okay. If that happens, no big deal. So I'm going to finish applying this gloss varnish, and it's going to take a little while for this to dry, so we're not going to do that on camera. And we will come back when that is all dry, and we'll go to our next step. Alright, so our gloss varnish is dry. I don't know if you can see that. And we just said it doesn't have a lot of color to it, and that's the idea. We weren't trying to undo our work. We just want a little bit of a shade, something to catch the light. Obviously, ice has a reflection to it. And you might think, okay, well now we're certainly done, right? Nope. Alright, so the other thing that ice does that makes it really look like ice is ice cracks. So, we've got to get some cracks in this ice, okay? So, here's what we look like right now. So what we're going to do is we've got our white over here on our palette still. We've still got it very thin. And we're going to go get some white. And of course, varnish is often your final step. It doesn't have to be. You can paint over varnish just fine. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw some cracks through the ice. Okay? Make sure I've got the right amount of paint here. It's a very careful balancing match with this, because you need to be very thin with these ice cracks. And you kind of want to be a little irregular with how you draw the cracks. The best thing you can do is kind of not think about your pattern. Have some straight lines, have some non-straight lines, right? You want to vary the thickness of the line some. And you want them to run through all the different colors. So you kind of lose it at some places, and you can kind of see the cracks in some places. Okay? And so what I'm doing is just very carefully and purposely kind of shaking my hand as I'm drawing. And I don't have any plan here. That is to say, I didn't sit down and sketch out where these cracks are going to be. I'm just kind of grabbing where I think looks good, and then every so often I'll go back. Maybe I'll trace where a couple lines come together over to solidify them a little bit, so that looks like a thicker crack. Okay, and so what we get now is something like that. Alright, and you kind of play with it until you like the look. You don't want to go overboard. But and so, like, what is the right amount of cracks here? That's up to you. But you definitely don't want them to have the same directionality. So, like, lots of different directions to your cracks and stuff like that. So I'm going to crack the rest of this ice out. And then we'll be back. And then we will do one of our final steps. We're almost there. Alright, welcome back. We're back in the spray booth for our final step. So, as you can see, we've got lots of cracks in our ice all over here. And now we're going to go for the final step. And this is the trickiest. So I've loaded up my airbrush with just a small amount of very thin white. Okay? And you'll notice that I've actually pulled the end of the tip off, right? So this little piece here. Because when you do that, what it lets you do is make very, very, very fine lines. Okay? So I've taken it off, and if we look over here on my sheet, I'll just bring up this piece of paper, you can see that what I can do is just trace a very fine line. Okay? And that's what we need to do. Because what we're going to do is that when ice cracks, it doesn't just form a line like that, like a lightning bolt. It fuzzes the ice around it because of the way the moisture works. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to kind of trace some of these cracks in this white. And we need some very fine control for this step. So, got our white loaded up. Very important to make sure we don't flood here or anything. And without the tip, you're going to have less control. So you really got to be careful. We just want to be very, very minor with this. This is also going to help to knock some of the shine out of this in places. Which is good, because ice isn't actually completely reflective all the way. Where there's snow accumulating or moisture, it's not going to reflect in the same way. And you can see I am being real careful here. Okay. So we're just kind of fuzzing around those cracks. Not everywhere, not every crack, just some of them. And if you notice you get any kind of like, it's real easy to get tip dry when you're doing this. So if you happen to notice any kind of little sputter, mix it up. Make sure you're nice and clean. Get some good flow going again, and then get back into it. Okay, don't let it splatter all over your mini. So there you can see what we've done is just fuzzed out the ice, just very minorly. And where we did that, we also took the shine out of the gloss varnish. So now we get a mix of reflectivity and not. Okay, so we're just going to do that over here on this one. Less is more with this. I'm sorry to be silent. I'm being very careful as I'm doing this, so I do apologize for not talking there for a moment. But, obviously, this is the most precision thing you'll do in this whole task. And you don't want to mess it up, because if you blow a bunch of paint all over your work, well, you're going to be nonplussed about that. So you want to do just very, very light sprays. And there we go. We're good. We fuzzed that out. We've knocked some of the gloss out. And we're good to go. So I'm going to finish up the gold pieces here. Get those all done. And I'll insert some photos of what it looks like when it's all set at the end. But there we go. Ice axes. All set. So as always, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I know this was a long one. But yeah, I think it makes a really cool effect. So, thank you very much, and have a good one, everybody. See you next time.